ESCANOR is the lion sin of pride and the most anomalous member of the 7 deadly sins by every measurable standard. Every other member of the group has power that scales with training, experience, or the type of opponent in front of them. ESCANOR'S power scales with the sun. From midnight until dawn, his physical strength is at its lowest. He is, during the hours of total darkness, approximately as capable as an ordinary human being. As the sun rises, his power begins to climb. By noon on any given day, he has reached the peak of what his ability allows, which the series designates as the One, a state in which his magical power exceeds every other being the series has introduced up to the point of its use. During the fight against the Demon King's manifestation in the final arc, ESCANOR uses the One Ultimate, an extended version of the Noon state that burns through his own lifespan to maintain the peak beyond the natural window. The physical output of the One is not expressed through a technique or a special attack. It is expressed through temperature. ESCANOR at noon generates heat at his skin's surface that exceeds what most materials can withstand, and the divine axe Rita that he carries amplifies and stores that heat across the hours leading to noon, releasing it in combat as an additional channel of destruction. What makes ESCANOR specifically dangerous at the One is not that he hits harder than anyone else. It is that his physical invulnerability at that state means nothing that has been introduced in the series can damage him through conventional means. He does not dodge. He does not defend. He stands and allows attacks to land, and they do not register. The cost of the One Ultimate is that using it beyond the natural noon window burns through ESCANOR'S own vitality to fuel the extension, consuming him from the inside. He used it to defeat the Demon King. He burned through everything he had to hold it long enough. He disintegrated when it ended. Charlotte Katakuri is the second son of the Charlotte family and the strongest of Big Mom's 3 sweet commanders at the time of the Whole Cake Island arc. His observation haki operates at a level that has no confirmed equal among any character introduced in One Piece up to the point where he is encountered. He does not simply sense the immediate future in the way that most advanced observation haki users can manage. He sees it with enough detail and enough lead time to effectively operate as though the future is the present. In practice, this means he has never been hit. Not during the events of the arc, not in the years before it. His entire combat history is constructed around an ability that makes conventional striking essentially impossible, because by the time an attack reaches the space he occupies, he has already moved. His Mochi Mochi no Mi gives him a paramecia-type ability that makes his body mochi, a substance he can reshape at will, and that has a damage resistance comparable to a rubber-type logia, absorbing impact rather than transmitting it. The combination of future sight observation haki and a body that does not respond to blunt force the way conventional bodies do makes him the closest thing to an untouchable opponent that the pre-Wano arc of One Piece produces. His awakened form extends his Devil Fruit ability beyond his own body, turning the surrounding environment into mochi that he controls as an extension of himself. What Luffy identifies and exploits during their extended fight is not a gap in Katakuri's technique. It is a gap in his experience. He has never fought someone whose attack patterns were sufficiently unpredictable to exceed his future sight. And when Luffy begins developing his own observation haki during the fight itself, operating on instinct rather than training, the window between what Katakuri sees and what actually happens begins to narrow in ways he cannot compensate for quickly enough. Broly's power in the 2018 Dragon Ball Super film operates differently from every other Saiyan transformation in the franchise because it is not a trained state. It is not achieved through meditation, near-death recovery, or the specific emotional catalysts that produce Super Saiyan in the series' standard transformation logic. Broly's power is genetic in a way that the series had not previously explored. He was born with a power level that alarmed King Vegeta enough to exile him to a remote planet as an infant, because the power present at birth exceeded what most Saiyans reach through years of training and battle. The transformation that manifests during his fight against Goku and Vegeta on Earth is not Super Saiyan in the conventional sense. The series designates it as Legendary Super Saiyan, a distinct evolutionary path that produces a different physical form, characterized by green-tinted energy rather than the golden aura of standard Super Saiyan, and by a size increase that is continuous rather than fixed, with the form growing larger and more powerful the longer it is active. The legendary Super Saiyan state has no observed ceiling within the film. Goku and Vegeta's Super Saiyan Blue, which requires the combination of Super Saiyan with the God Ki produced through the Super Saiyan God ritual, is insufficient against Broly at the point he reaches. The combined Gogeta fusion, which produces a warrior using both their powers simultaneously, is what finally generates enough output to push him back. Broly's transformation is not powered by anger at injustice or a desire to protect someone. It is powered by grief, the loss of his father Paragus, killed by Frieza during the engagement, which triggered the final escalation of his power in a form that the people who had manipulated him into the fight were not prepared to survive.
KILLUA'S GODSPEED is an application of his transmuter Nen ability that converts his Nen directly into electricity and routes it through his nervous system. The basic version of this, which he develops earlier in the series, is called Thunderbolt, a direct offensive discharge. GODSPEED is the advanced application, split into two components. Whirlwind routes the electricity through his body's motor control system, allowing his muscles to react to stimuli at the speed of electrical impulse, rather than the speed of neural signal processing. This removes the biological delay between perceiving a threat and the body responding to it, the fraction of a second that exists between seeing something and moving away from it, and replaces it with near instantaneous movement driven by electrical signal. Speed of lightning is the second component, which routes electricity through his bodies differently to produce sustained maximum speed movement, rather than reactive movement.
The combination means Killua in GODSPEED is moving faster than most opponents in the series can perceive, reacting faster than their attacks can reach him, and generating electrical discharge simultaneously. The technique has a specific cost. It requires significant Nen reserves to maintain, and the electrical routing through his nervous system is not indefinitely sustainable without physical damage. The moment Killua uses it most significantly in the series is during his protection of Alluka, his younger sibling, whose wish-granting ability makes her a target for every faction that knows she exists. Killua in GODSPEED moving through opponents who are trying to reach Alluka is not a fight in the conventional sense. It is a gap in time where threats cease to exist before they can complete their approach.
Toji Fushiguro's designation as a divine slayer is not a formal title the series awards him. It is the functional description of what he did. Operating without a single unit of cursed energy in a world where cursed energy is the foundational requirement for everything that makes a combatant capable of engaging with jujitsu on any meaningful level. Cursed energy powers barriers, detection, binding vows, domain expansions, and the reinforcement that makes sorcerers physically superior to ordinary humans. Toji has none of it. His body produces none. The absence of cursed energy that would be a crippling disability for any sorcerer is, for Toji, invisibility. He has no cursed energy signature for barriers or detection techniques to register, which means he moves through the security architecture of the jujitsu world as though it does not exist.
His physical body compensates for the absence through a density and musculature that exceeds anything produced by cursed energy reinforcement, and his inventory curse, a small cursed spirit he stores in his own body, carries his weapon collection, giving him access to cursed tools that he wields without the cursed energy required to unlock their full capabilities, using the weapons themselves rather than the power built into them. During the hidden inventory arc, he dismantled Gojo Satoru, who was already acknowledged as the most gifted sorcerer of his generation, twice. He killed Gojo. Gojo's reverse curse technique activated post-mortem and rebuilt him from the cellular level up, which is a survival mechanism Toji could not have anticipated because it had never been done before. The man without cursed energy defeated the strongest twice, and was only stopped when the target developed a capability that had not previously existed in order to survive him.
Giorno Giovanna acquires Gold Experience Requiem during the final confrontation with Diavolo in Golden Wind by piercing his stand Gold Experience with the Requiem arrow, the same arrow that produced Polnareff's Silver Chariot Requiem earlier in the arc. The transformation that results is categorically different from any other stand evolution produced by the arrow. Requiem stands are described as stands that have achieved a form beyond their original capability, by the arrow recognizing something in them. What Gold Experience Requiem recognizes and amplifies is Gold Experience's existing ability, which was the power to give life to things, to convert inanimate objects into living organisms, to create organic tissue from non-organic material. Gold Experience Requiem's ability is stated in the series, in terms that are not metaphorical. It returns everything to zero. Any action taken against Giorno, any attack, any decision, any sequence of events set in motion to harm him, is returned to the state of never having happened. The attack occurs, reaches him, and is nullified, not by defense, but by the negation of the causal chain that produced it. Diavolo's ability, King Crimson, which had been the most comprehensively difficult power in Golden Wind to counter because it erased time segments and allowed him to act within the erase period without being subject to consequences, is nullified by Requiem. King Crimson erases time. Gold Experience Requiem returns causality to zero. The time erasure is erased. Diavolo's death loop, the state Giorno places him in at the end, is not a conventional death. It is an infinite recursion of dying in different ways, returned to zero each time before completion, so that death is approached and not reached indefinitely. SABER'S Excalibur is the most powerful noble phantasm available to any servant participating in the Fifth Holy Grail War in Fate's Day Night, and it carries a cost that distinguishes it from the noble phantasms of the other servants competing in the war. Most noble phantasms are deployed at the moment of need, and their cost is paid in magical energy at the point of use. Excalibur's output is not generated from Saber's own magical energy reserves. It is generated from the magical energy of her master, channeled through their contract and converted into the sword's output at the moment of activation. The release of Excalibur produces a concentrated beam of magical energy that travels in a straight line, at a scale that eliminates anything in its path, without distinguishing between servants, heroic spirit-level opponents, and the physical landscape they are standing on. The restraint applied to Excalibur throughout most of the war is not a limitation of Saber's choice. It is a practical constraint. Using Excalibur at full output requires magical energy at a quantity that Shiro Emiya, her master in the Fifth War, does not have the capacity to provide consistently. The sword is available to her at all times. The ability to release it fully depends on resources that are not always present. When those resources are provided, either through exceptional circumstances or through Shiro's specific ability to project traced weapons and provide energy that way, what Excalibur produces at full release is not a technique that can be defended against within the system of the Holy Grail War as it is structured. It is an absolute output delivered in a direction, and the direction ceases to exist as a threat. The red trump card in the Night Raid context refers to Akame's ability in Akame ga Kill, the activation of the curse built into the blade Murasame, which is the final and most destructive application of her primary weapon. Murasame is a katana that kills with a single cut, regardless of the wound's severity. The mechanism is a curse distributed through the blade's edge. Contact with any living being transmits the curse through the cut,
which then progresses toward the heart and kills the target within seconds. There is no resistance to it available to anyone introduced in the series up to the point of its use. The only way to survive a cut from Murasame is to immediately remove the affected tissue before the curse progresses far enough to reach the heart, which requires identifying the cut site instantly and having the means and presence of mind to act on it while in combat.
The red trump card is distinct from Murasame's standard use. It activates when Akemi cuts herself with the blade, turning the curse against her own body and using the resulting energy surge to amplify her speed and physical output dramatically, at the cost of the curse beginning to consume her from the inside simultaneously. She used it against Esdeath, who was the most powerful individual in the Empire, and who had constructed an ability around the manipulation of ice at a scale that could freeze time itself in a localized area. Esdeath fighting at full capability against any opponent other than Akemi in that specific state was not a fight. Against Akemi using the red trump card, with the curse running through her own body, accelerating every physical system she had, while simultaneously killing her, it became something closer to even for long enough to matter. Lucy is the name given to the Diclonius, a human-adjacent species with invisible telekinetic arms called vectors, who is the central figure of Elfenlied. And her psychological state at the series' beginning is the product of a specific sequence of events that the series reveals in fragments across its runtime. Diclonius children are born with small horns and the vector ability, which makes them identifiable at birth, and which the research facility that conducts experiments on them treats as sufficient justification for their treatment as subjects rather than people. Lucy was not born in the facility. She was born and placed in an orphanage as a human child. Her horns were small enough to be concealed, and she spent her early childhood in the ordinary social misery of an institution, where some children are treated well and others are not, depending entirely on circumstances beyond their control. She found a dog. She cared for it in secret because having something to care for was the closest thing available to having something that was hers. The children who had made her a target found out about the dog and killed it in front of her. The vectors activated. Everyone in the immediate area died. What the series presents as Lucy's split personality, a childlike alternate identity named Nu who emerges after a head injury, is not a supernatural phenomenon. It is the psychological architecture of a person who experienced so much early trauma that compartmentalization became the only available response. The killing capacity she carries and the person she might have been exist in the same body, separated by whatever barrier her mind constructed to keep them from destroying each other. The facility that eventually captures and experiments on her does not create her violence. It confirms what she had already learned about what the world intended for her. Johann Liebert's emptiness in Monster is not a characterization of evil as absence. It is a characterization of a specific kind of psychological damage that the series traces with clinical precision across its entire runtime. Johann was a child in a program that conducted psychological experiments on children selected for exceptional intelligence, designed to produce a specific kind of person, one capable of extraordinary things without the emotional constraints that ordinary development installs. The program succeeded in ways its administrators did not intend and could not control. What it produced in Johann was not a person with suppressed emotions. It was a person who had the capacity for something like connection, who demonstrated it in his relationship with his twin sister Anna, and who had everything else systematically removed or replaced with a void that he spent his adult life attempting to fill by producing the conditions that felt most native to what he had become. Johann does not kill for pleasure in the conventional sense. He kills with the specific interest of a person testing whether any outcome can produce the feeling that something matters. He is one of the most dangerous human beings in the series world, not because he is physically exceptional, but because the absence of a reason not to do something is sufficient justification for him to do it, and the absence extends to everything. Dr. Tenma's pursuit of him across the series is the series' argument that the emptiness Johan embodies is not inevitable, that the same conditions that produced Johan could, under different circumstances, produce something else, and that the intervention of a single person at a specific moment can matter even when everything that followed seems to refute it.
Isabella in The Promised Neverland is one of the most comprehensively tragic figures in the series because she is simultaneously the story's most effective antagonist and its clearest demonstration of what the farm system does to the people it does not consume. Isabella was a child at Grace Fieldhouse. She was smart, exceptional scores, the kind of scores that kept her at the farm longer than most children stayed, developing her brain for a harvest that she could not know was coming. She had a friend named Leslie who created music that she loved. Leslie was shipped out. Isabella climbed the wall trying to escape after he was gone and saw what was on the other side, the void, the cliff, the impossibility of any conventional escape. The previous mother found her there and explained the options. Isabella chose to become a mother. She underwent the training, which included becoming pregnant and giving birth to a child she would never raise. That child was Ray, whose unusual memory allowed him to retain the experience of being in utero, which is how he knew the truth about the farm before Emma and Norman discovered it, and why he recognized the song Isabella hummed as the one Leslie had made. Isabella managed Grace Fieldhouse with complete competence and genuine affection for the children she was raising to be harvested. The affection was not performance. The management was not cruelty in the conventional sense. She had accepted the world's terms because she had seen the wall and understood there was nothing on the other side that she could reach. And having accepted those terms, she made the best possible version of the life they allowed. When the children escape, she does not pursue them beyond what her role requires. She lets her hair down. She was their mother. That was always true. Satan in Devilman Crybaby revealed to be Ryo Asuka, Akira's closest friend, the person who initiated the entire sequence of events by convincing Akira to merge with the demon Amon, is the series' most genuinely devastating figure because the horror of what Satan did is inseparable from the reason it was done. Satan is the original fallen angel, the being who led the rebellion against God and who has been in conflict with humanity as God's chosen for longer than human civilization has existed.
The plan that Satan executes across the series, revealing demons to humanity and allowing the mutual destruction of both, is not malice in the straightforward sense. It is the action of a being who loves one person, who has always loved that one person across iterations of the cycle that the series reveals has happened before, and who cannot find any other way to be near them without the framework of the war between angels, demons, and humanity, making that nearness impossible. Satan destroys the world for Akira, not as a secondary consequence of something else, directly, deliberately, as the intended outcome of a plan constructed around the specific goal of a world where the two of them could exist without the conflict separating them. Akira dies in the process. The world is gone. God informs Satan that the cycle is starting over, that this has happened before, that it will happen again, that the outcome is the same each iteration. Satan holds what is left of Akira and weeps in a way that the series has not prepared the audience for, because everything before it has positioned Satan as the architect of catastrophe. The architect is mourning. The mourning is real. The world it cost is also real.
Rock Lee was born without the ability to use chakra for ninjutsu or genjutsu. In the world of Naruto, this is a devastating limitation. Virtually every combat technique available to shinobi relies on chakra manipulation. Without it, a person cannot walk on water, cannot create elemental attacks, cannot use the signature abilities that define every major fighter in the series. Rock Lee was told as a child that he would never be a real ninja. His instructors assessed his abilities and concluded that the gap between what he could do and what the profession required was too wide to close. Guy Sensei disagreed. Guy took Lee as a student and gave him a single pathway forward, taijutsu, the physical combat art, developed to a level that no one had ever reached before because no one had ever needed to rely on it exclusively. Lee trained his body beyond what human physiology is designed to withstand. He wore weighted training devices on his legs for years, building muscle density and leg strength that made his movement speed almost incomprehensible in combat.
All of this was preparation for the 8 inner gates, a technique that forces the body's own chakra pathway system open beyond its natural limits, removing every biological restriction that keeps the human body functioning safely. The human body imposes limits on itself deliberately.
Muscles do not operate at full capacity because doing so would tear the tendons that anchor them. The heart does not beat at maximum speed continuously because doing so would destroy it. The 8 inner gates remove every one of these restrictions simultaneously. Opening the first gate increases physical strength and speed dramatically. Each successive gate multiplies those effects. Opening the 7th gate pushes the user far beyond anything a human body should be capable of producing. The skin turns red. Blood vessels rupture beneath the surface. The body begins tearing itself apart from the inside while still moving, still fighting, still generating force that no opponent in the series can match without extraordinary power of their own. When Rock Lee opened 5 of the 8 gates during his fight against Gaara in the Chunin exams, he moved at speeds that Gaara's sand defense, which had never failed to protect him before, could not track. He landed hits on Gaara. He did it while his body was destroying itself with every movement. The aftermath left both of Lee's arms and both of his legs shattered by the recoil of his own technique, not by Gaara's counterattack, by the force his own muscles generated against his own skeleton. His recovery took months and was not guaranteed. The medical assessment was that the injuries might be permanent. Rock Lee had pushed a technique that the human body is not designed to survive and paid for every second of it in bone and muscle tissue. Guy Sensei opened all 8 gates during his fight against Madara Uchiha, a man who had become effectively immortal after absorbing the 10 tails and become the host of the combined power of every tailed beast. At that point in the 4th Ninja War, Madara could not be harmed. Every technique the Alliance threw at him failed. Guy made a choice. He opened all 8 gates knowing precisely what it meant. The 8th gate, the gate of death, forces the heart to pump blood so fast and at such pressure that the blood itself ignites, turning red and burning through the skin as steam. The user's body begins incinerating from the inside. The attacks generated at this level of output are so powerful that they visibly reshape the landscape. Guy's final technique, Evening Elephant, produced shockwaves that hit Madara hard enough to damage him for the first time in the entire war. Madara, who had been untouchable, was pushed back. Then Guy used the Night Guy technique, moving at speeds that bent space itself, and the kick landed with enough force to crack Madara's body. Madara said it was the closest to death he had felt in his immortal state. Guy's leg shattered completely on impact. His body began to collapse. He was dying in real time, burning alive from the inside, saved only by Naruto's intervention, which used Hagoromo's power to halt the death process at the last possible moment. Guy survived, but the technique took everything it promised to take and only failed to kill him because of an intervention that had never existed before in the history of the series and would not exist again. Human transmutation in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is not a battle technique. It is not used in combat. It is used in grief, which makes it significantly more devastating in terms of what it costs. Alchemy in the world of Full Metal Alchemist operates on the principle of equivalent exchange. To create something, you must sacrifice something of equal value. Human transmutation is the attempt to create or resurrect a human life, which means the cost is assessed in human terms. Edward and Alphonse Elric lost their mother to illness when Edward was 11 and Alphonse was 10. They had spent years studying alchemy, becoming extraordinary practitioners at ages when most people are still learning the fundamentals. They used that knowledge to attempt to bring their mother back. The transmutation circle they drew was precise. Their preparation was thorough. It did not matter. The attempt to create a human body pulled them both into the gate of truth, a dimension at the threshold of all alchemical knowledge, where a towering door opens and something reaches out and takes something from whoever enters. What it takes is calibrated to what the person knows, what they value, and what they are attempting to do. Alphonse lost his entire body. Edward lost his left leg.
when Edward tried to anchor Alphonse's soul to a suit of armor using his own blood, performing alchemy with no preparation, no transmutation circle, working from desperation alone, the gate took his right arm. Edward was 11 years old when this happened. He lost 2 limbs attempting to resurrect his mother and failed completely. What came out of the transmutation was not her, was not anything that had ever been her, was a mass of biological material assembled incorrectly that died within seconds. The law of equivalent exchange did not permit the transaction. It took what it was owed and gave back nothing. Edward spent years afterward wearing auto-male prosthetics, mechanical replacements built from metal that required surgical attachment to the nervous system, and carrying the knowledge that the worst decision he ever made cost him his arm and his brother's body before either of them were old enough to understand what they were attempting. Izuku Midoriya inherited One for All from All Might and spent the first year of using it destroying himself with it. One for All is a stockpiling quirk, a power that accumulates and amplifies over generations, passed from holder to holder, growing stronger each time. By the time it reached Izuku, it had been developed through 6 previous holders and carried an amount of raw power that Izuku's body, which was born quirkless and had never developed the physical reinforcement that quirk users naturally build, was completely incapable of containing. Using One for All at full output shattered every bone in whatever limb he channeled it through. Not fractured, shattered. The arm after the first use at the sports festival looks like the bones had been put through a grinder. Recovery Girl, the school's medical hero, could heal him, but healing consumed his own stamina, and the repeated use meant that the total damage was compounding, and she eventually refused to continue treating self-inflicted injuries at the scale he was generating them. Izuku's training arc across the first 2 seasons of My Hero Academia is fundamentally a story about a person attempting to use a tool designed for a different body and working out how much of his own skeleton he can afford to sacrifice per fight while still walking away. He trained specifically to increase the percentage of One for All he could channel without shattering bone, going from 5% output to 8, then higher. Each increment purchased through months of training and the accumulated structural damage of every previous use. The full power applications were reserved for situations where the alternative was worse than the injury, which meant that every time Izuku used One for All without a support system around him, the decision was a calculation about how broken he was willing to be to solve the problem in front of him. The Reaper's Death Seal is a technique used by the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, during his final battle against Orochimaru. Orochimaru had resurrected the 1st and 2nd Hokage using the impure world reincarnation technique, forcing the bodies of the dead to serve his purposes, and Hiruzen was 69 years old and fighting in a body that had spent decades accumulating the wear of constant combat. He was not in a position to defeat Orochimaru directly. He was not going to win through force. He used the Reaper Death Seal instead. The Reaper Death Seal summons the Death God, a vast spectral entity that manifests behind the user and drives its arm through their body, reaching forward through them to pull the target's soul out from their chest. The technique kills the user unconditionally, regardless of outcome, regardless of success, regardless of whether the mission is accomplished. The Death God takes both souls, the targets and the casters. Hiruzen used it to seal away the arms of Orochimaru's soul, permanently removing his ability to use arm-based jutsu for years. He did not kill Orochimaru. The technique did not allow him to finish what he started because his aging body gave out before the process completed. He died with his hands inside the chest of the man who had destroyed his village, having permanently crippled him rather than eliminated him, having paid the absolute maximum price the technique could extract. The Death God does not negotiate. It does not accept partial payment. It simply takes what was agreed to and leaves the transaction complete.
Ichigo Kurosaki's Mugetsu is a technique that exists at the end of a transformation process that he was explicitly warned would cost him everything.
Isshin Kurosaki told his son before he used the final Getsuga Tensho that using it meant becoming the Getsuga itself, merging with the energy of his Zanpakuto spirit so completely that it consumed the Shinigami powers he had developed over 3 years of combat. Ichigo trained inside his inner world with Sengetsu, his Zanpakuto spirit, to reach the final Getsuga Tensho with full knowledge of what it cost. The technique released a wave of black energy that overwhelmed Aizen Sosuke's transcended form. Aizen, who had absorbed the Hogyoku and transformed into something that had moved beyond the reach of anything Shinigami power could touch, was stopped. The Mugetsu did not kill him, but it weakened him to the point where the Hogyoku's own judgment turned against him, revoking the power it had granted because Aizen's desire for it had been replaced by something else. Ichigo lost his Shinigami power. Everything he had developed was a consequence that outlasted the fight by a significant margin. He eventually regained his powers through a different mechanism, but the version of himself that used Mugetsu ceased to exist the moment the technique completed.
The founding Titan's power, as used by Eren Yeager at the end of Attack on Titan, is not destroyed by its use, but the person using it is. The Founding Titan is the most powerful ability in the series. It connects all subjects of Ymir through the Paths dimension. It can alter their bodies, their memories, their biological structure. Whoever activates it in its full capacity can speak to every Eldian alive simultaneously and issue commands that cannot be refused. Eren used it to activate the rumbling, the awakening of hundreds of millions of wall titans, the hardened giants that had been dormant inside the 3 walls for over a century, and the directive to march them across every nation on Earth outside Paradise Island. The scale of what the Founding Titan's full activation produces is beyond what any other technique in any series covered here approaches. The cost is not the technique destroying the user's body in the moment of use. The cost is that Eren designed the entire sequence of events, his own capture, his apparent radicalization, the mission to Marley, the alliances formed and broken, specifically to arrive at the moment of activation, and he knew, through the Attack Titan's ability to receive memories from future holders, that the sequence ended with Mikasa cutting off his head. He did not find another way out. He did not attempt to survive. He constructed the path to activation, knowing it was also the path to his death, and then walked it voluntarily over the course of years. The Founding Titan's full power required a user willing to be the last thing it ever consumed. Eren Yeager was 17 when he first transformed. He was 19 when Mikasa found him inside the Titan's mouth and finished what had been decided before either of them was born. The 8 Trigrams sealing style used by Minato Namikaze during the Nine Tails attack on Konoha falls into the same category as the Reaper Death Seal, a technique whose cost is the user's life, deployed at a moment when no other option remains. Minato was the 4th Hokage, considered the fastest ninja who had ever lived, and he fought the Nine Tails when it was being controlled by Obito Uchiha's Sharingan on the night of Naruto's birth. He could not kill the Nine Tails. Destroying it would have redistributed its chakra back into circulation and allowed it to reconstitute elsewhere. He could not contain it indefinitely using external sealing methods. He split the Nine Tails chakra, sealed half into himself using the Death God, and sealed the other half into his newborn son using the 8 Trigram sealing style, a technique designed to allow the Jinchuriki to access the sealed power over time rather than being overwhelmed by it immediately. The 8 Trigram seal also imprinted Minato's own chakra into Naruto, designed to manifest at the specific moment when Naruto would need guidance and the seal would need reinforcement. Minato was 24 years old when he died. His wife Kushina, who had been the Nine Tails' previous Jinchuriki, died the same night from the injuries sustained when the creature was forcibly extracted from her. They died within minutes of each other, having just sealed a monster into their infant son, and left him with a village that did not, for many years, understand what he was carrying or why. The technique worked exactly as intended. Both of them knew what it cost before they used it. If you like this video, turn on the notification bell and subscribe for more.